Most of our patients, the vast majority are very old, and they are able to look back on a life. One of our goals is to help them think through the meaning of that life, and to the extent that they want to. A child is on the front end of life and is still developing. And what our philosophy is, we don't want, when a child is gravely ill and perhaps terminally ill, we still don't want to ever separate out the hope that their parents may have of a cure, of treatment that would prolong life. It's different in adults. By that time, adults are ready to back away from curative therapy. They feel like their life has been lived. And parents are, we don't want to put parents in that position. Sometimes children are in that position, but we don't want to put parents in that position. So we want to be side by side while they're still seeking curative therapy, because when a child is sick, the whole family is there, because their whole family's together. Many times our older patients may be living alone, or they may only have one relative with them, a caregiver, a spouse. A child typically in a family unit, and they're still functioning. Mom and dad go to work, the kids go to, their siblings go to school, the child is sick. It's a whole family that we're taking care of, and a whole family that's trying to figure out about this. How do we help this child? So it's different and it's the same. We support families in older patients, but we support families in younger patients. And then children too have a more unpredictable course. They can go into remission and not need any services for a while, and then have a relapse, and that may go on. So they may come into services in the medical services and also our supportive services, and then go out for a while. So it's unpredictable. We emphasize the support that we can give a family because their lives are disrupted. Very often, particularly in our community, if a child is sick, their physician who's treating that illness is on the other side of the bay. So they have to, figure out how do I get over there? And then what do? I have to work over here. My job's over here, and my other kids, they go to school over here. So we emphasize the support that we can give them while they're going through all this to keep their doctor across the bay, but also keep their lives intact on this side of the bay. And sometimes that leads to fragmentation. Well, my physician's over there, but I'm over here. How do I get services? Well, we can be the link between that physician, because we emphasize that families keep their physicians. We can be the link between that physician and services in the home, because that's where you want to have your child at home. So by supporting the family, by helping the child be comfortable if the child's having symptoms, we can pull that together in a more collaborative, cohesive approach to the child, even while they're pursuing a cure. But we do want people to realize that we understand what the process that a family goes through and the services that we can provide. And those services really there's a ripple effect. As I said, you have the child, then you have the parents, then they have the siblings, well, then they have friends, and then they have classmates. And those kids are trying to figure out what's going on. And they're going through a process. And our staff is able to go into the school and at an age-appropriate level, depending on how old the child is, sort of help kids talk through what's going on. And help really those circles of people who are affected by that child's illness. One of the things that patients of any age, families of any description, appreciate is the truth. Here's what we're dealing with. Our child is gravely ill, and there's a very good chance that our child is not going to survive. That's the truth. Whether it comes from their physician or they learn it themselves. So we don't want to proceed under any false pretense. these are children whose lives are limited. I'll tell you about one particular child that Talbot Hospice was involved in taking care of, and it will illustrate the kinds of support that are meaningful. This was a young boy who was dying, and it was beyond the question of whether there was a cure. The boy's doctors were in Baltimore, at the medical centers, but the family was here, and it was a young family. It was a young boy, and they were overwhelmed just by the fact that they knew they were going to lose their child, and also by all of the arrangements they were having to make going back and forth. They didn't speak English, and they had very little means. The little boy was actually sleeping on a couch in the living room. They had a very small apartment. So they continued, obviously, under the care of their physicians in Baltimore. But what Talbot Hospice did was to recognize the various ways that they could help. First of all, we sent out a request: who can speak their language? So we had volunteers who came and who could visit with them and speak their language and listen to them and explain that. And when the nurses would go out, the volunteers would go and help them understand. We gave them a phone card so that they were able to afford to call their doctors in Baltimore and stay in constant contact with the doctors. And then one of our volunteers got a crib. Put this crib together in the living room so that the little boy had an actual crib to sleep in. And they got a quilt and everything. And that's where he ended up dying, very peacefully in a bed on a couch. And that kind of support changes the situation. It
takes a certain amount off
right.
of the shoulders of the parents.
It does. So, and that just impacted so many different people who got involved in helping this family, this overwhelmed family, and this little boy, and made it at the very least a peaceful time that they could be with their son.